Great. Well, thanks, Patrick. Welcome, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're from. Thanks for your time. So, yeah, we wanted to get into how to capture accurate telematics data with the AssetWorks FSS GPS. So, just as a bit of a preamble, I'm going to go through a few slides here. Then I'm going to pass it over to Phil, who's going to run through the actual product, give you a look and feel of the product itself. So FSS, or Field Service Solutions, is, we came into AssetWorks via acquisition in 2013, just to give you a little background. And prior to that, FSS had been in business for over 25 years in wireless technology. We did deploy some of the first commercially available GPS deployments, working with like AT&T and Rockwell in the mid-1990s. Back then, they were a lot larger and a lot more expensive. And under the previous company pre-acquisition, we deployed tens of thousands of GPS devices worldwide. All right. And then today, FSS is a standard offering to all AssetWorks clients. So from a bit of an overview, FSS is a modular platform. So we do have the GPS telematics, which is going to be the focus of today's call, which is, of course, your vehicle tracking, your asset tracking, driver behavior coaching, the standard GPS telematics capabilities. Being a modular system, however, we do offer some expansion platform. I'm just going to touch on that in the slide today, and that can be for a future session. But, we do offer compliance modules, and with that, we refer to that more of our DVIR, so our vehicle driver and vehicle inspection. It's pre- and post-trip inspection. We have an electronic login device module, so lets you capture your hours of service, especially if you have heavy-duty vehicles and meeting FMCSA requirements. We capture your IFTA data, which is the mileage and fuel utilized in a per tax jurisdiction. So those are some of the compliance modules we have. We do also have a mobile computing side. Now, this is electronic ticketing and work order dispatching, data collection. This is all related to work that the drivers of your vehicles do. So this is not related to service requests with an M5 or F8. This is all strictly related to operations. Dispatching the people that are driving your vehicles, eliminating any paper-based processes and data collection they need to do, and putting it into an electronic real-time system. All right. We also have a safety module within FSS, and that gives, there's two elements to that. One's the lone worker, which is very much around hey, you're working alone, maybe a potentially dangerous situation. We want you to check in every hour or 90 minutes, whatever your policies are. And if you don't check in, then we're going to escalate and create alerts and make sure someone gets out to take care of you. And there's also emergency button, same type of escalation process. So if you're hitting any emergency button, allowing the system to escalate and notify the people that need to be notified to give you a hand. So with the FSS solution, we also have a large, open APIs available. So the majority of these are REST-based web services, which allow you access to all the data we capture. We also do custom things such as file transfer or custom integrations, depending on the need of a situation. And of course, with these APIs and integrations, that's how we also talk back to our own product, the Fleet Focus M5 and FA integration. And I'm going to touch a bit more on that later. So some of the devices that we use, just to introduce you to that, we do have a range of hardware. And again, we're having the right hardware for the right asset. So we have the OBD2 plug and play for your light duties. Maybe on the heavy duty, you want to capture IO, I want to capture PTO or plow up and down or bucket out in and out of lift or stabilizers out. So the ability to capture IO, along with, of course, the ECM connection for your meters and trouble codes and mileage. And we also have asset trackers. So that can be for trailers or that can be for high value assets, generators, light standards, water pumps, things that you want to track. Then also you maybe want to track utilization and engine runtime. So we can capture, for example, runtime on generator from power on to, ignition on, ignition off of that asset, just to help you also maintain those assets on a preventative maintenance schedule. When we go beyond GPS telematics, we do have other devices that you'd need. For example, if you're doing DVIs or ELDs or field ticketing, so we have the rugged Android tablets, or you can go more consumer grade, smartphone or like a Samsung tablet as well. Those are some options you can utilize. I won't get into the details of these right now because this isn't the focus today. But you know, when we do our compliance side, so for vehicle inspection, you know, it's programmable. We have clients, you know, depending on what jurisdiction you do, you can just do pre-trips, just do post-trips, you can do both. Maybe you have to do it every 24 hours. You know, we are compliant with the FMCSA 39611 for the U.S. and then Schedule 1 for Canada for DVIs. And then for ELDs, capturing hours of service, again, both Canadian and USA support for ELDs, if that's applicable for your organization. And then the field ticketing side, again, that's your work dispatch, your data collection. Maybe I'm capturing signatures, or maybe associated with the work I'm doing in the field. You're also scanning other documents or attaching pictures to that relate to the work you've done in the field. So this is a completely additional module. It really, basically, with FSS as your GPS telematics, you're not pigeonholed to just GPS telematics. You can expand and utilize modules for additional functionality across different divisions within your fleet, and that can help pay for GPS telematics. Maybe not just being the fleet side things, maybe other divisions will have benefit of it. All right. And another element with the hardware that we use in our GPS system is the crash algorithm. So this real-time accident alerting, it's capturing, it's looking at G-forces and speed and trouble code and the codes that are being spit out. So it's looking at that to identify, hey, I think that this vehicle's been in an accident. It generates a real-time alert. And then you can also have an accident reconstruction report, which can give you a little more details. Hey, what was going on just before and just after that accident occurred. All right. So a topic that's critical here, of course, is the integration side of things. So with FSS, of course, we have the vehicle, the fault codes, the trouble codes, malfunction indicator lights. They're coming from FSS down into M5FA. Your meter readings, your engine hours, and mileage is coming in to give you utilization and run your preventive maintenance programs. And then, of course, location comes in, which is just convenient, so you know where the assets are when you're going out to repair them. But the difference between FSS and some of the other and all the other integrations that we have with third-party organizations is the two-way integration. The asset data that you have in Fleet Focus and M5FA flows down automatically to FSS. So just that system of record and that two-way integration, it allows you to maintain that single database of assets in your Fleet Focus system, so that any additions, modifications, terminations, those all get synchronized automatically in FSS. So your value of that is, it reduces your time. I'm not maintaining two databases, and the data is consistent all the time, and eliminates the errors that you get from manual transposing of data. So that's because it's our own product, we have that deeper two-way integration. This is a real value add in terms of the FSS solution. Mm-hmm. So of course you're probably familiar with this. It's automating, it's populating your meters in your FA and your M5 and these fields that you have highlighted here. That's all coming automatically in near real time. Right now it's typically about every 15 minutes, but that's programmable. So pretty much real-time data is populated in your FA M5 systems. And then same with trouble codes. Those are coming in essentially real time. And one of the value in getting these trouble codes is you can prioritize codes. You can get a ton of codes, as you all know. But the FAM5 allows you to prioritize those codes. So, hey, these codes are important. I need to maybe look at generating and driver service requests a little more immediately than some of the other codes that can just be available. So next time the vehicle's in, we can look at that. All right. So a little additional info before we get to the demo is AssetWorks, we're a wireless network wholesaler. So when you get an FSS solution, we deploy that depending on where you're located. Is it AT&T, is it Verizon, Canada, Bell, Rogers, TELUS. We do have satellite GPS products as well. So some of our clients with our more remote, some of our products are satellite. And we can mix and match wireless carriers, whatever the right fit for your organization and geography. So what that gives us is we're fully the single throat to choke. We do all the activation, deactivation management. We have portals in. We can manage your SIM, and we manage all your billing 100%. The billing is all out of AssetWorks. We're not involved with any third parties for this. And finally, from a deployment options, typically we are hosted, and hosted solution. We do offer an on-premise option if your organization prefers to have all of your applications on-premise. All right. And finally, I did touch on the APIs, but we do have a number of key ones I wanted to point out here. There is an employee system of records, so while just like how assets flow in from M5FA to FSS, if your employees are in another system of record, we also have an API that allows you to synchronize that employee data, so all the employees can come into our system from an API. And things like advanced location, if you have other systems and maybe outage management or other city systems where you want to get that GPS location, that's available on an API or any events. And also if you have some of your own mapping data and created your own geofences already and landmarks in your system, those can get synchronized into FSS via this API, two-way API. All right. With that, I'm going to pass this over to Phil for some demos. And again, any questions, please throw them in the chat room, and we'll get to them when we wrap up.
Okay. So hi everybody, good to get a chance to talk to you today about our FSS product and show you a little bit about what it does. When you first log into FSS, you're going to be presented with our map view. So I'm just going to go through a little bit of the layout of the screen, a few of the features that are on it. To start out, we use Google Maps as the backbone. So this is going to be something that all your users are probably familiar with. They can do the same type of search that they're used to. It'll automatically generate my locations, standard zoom, all the points of interest. You turn on satellite, you get the same kind of resolution that they would be used to in their standard Google Maps, which has come a long ways in recent years. So people are always happy to see those types of things. But then where it starts to get a little bit different is when you look at some of the more advanced search options. So you have basic street address searches if you want to put in something, individual fields, lat long, LSD, NTS, and even things like geofences. So if I'm interested in looking up one of my geofences, and that happens to be here in my Chicago service area, I can just do a search and it immediately pulls up my my service area that I have built around Chicago. I'm going to turn off the geofences for now because you can turn off map layers easily within FSS. And I'll just quickly talk about terrain. I always wondered what the terrain map would be used for until one of our clients came up with an actual scenario where they were putting it to use. So a lot of their heavy duty vehicles were governed. So they were set to a maximum speed and they couldn't exceed that. And our system kept saying that they were traveling faster than that maximum speed they were governed to. And once we added the terrain layer, they actually saw that the only times they were exceeding the governed level is when they were heading downhill. So once they had the elevation showing on the map, they were able to see that yes, they are actually moving faster, and that's the reason. So something that I learned that day, and something that that they learned as well. So that was kind of interesting. So next, what we have is what we have called our map filters. Now, if you have a large city, you would start to have a map that would get very, very busy very quickly based on the vehicle density. So what we've set up is map filters that are set for individual users to exactly what they need to filter down all the information they want to see. So as an example, you can look at divisions, and these would be all the divisions or the agencies within your business. So they can look at individual ones there. They can also do things like look at asset types. In this case, I have it set up for intermodal because that's the one I want to look at today. So now what this has done is it's filtered down my list here, and it's filtered down the number of vehicles I see. So if I zoom out my map, there used to be more vehicles all over the map. Now I'm just down to my intermodal vehicles that are in this location. Next, we can look at geofences. So you can filter vehicles based on them being inside or outside a geofence. So if I go back to my Chicago service area, if I'm just interested in vehicles right now that are outside my Chicago service area, I can turn that on, and now it's just going to show me all my vehicles that aren't in my standard service area. Turn that one back off. Next, we have groups. So what groups are? Groups can be private groups or public groups. So as a user, I can create a group for myself that are just the assets and or employees that I'm interested in. So if I'm a supervisor and I'm only responsible for a certain set of employees or a certain set of assets, I can build a group for myself and easily filter the map down just to that group. Similarly, as an administrator, let's say that your service area is broken down into quadrants. You can have a northwest quadrant, a northeast quadrant, things like that. and then people can filter on those based on the quadrant that they work in. So if I turn this on for my Western team, you're going to see that that filters it down now to a very small list, because as a supervisor, these are all the vehicles and the people that I'm interested in. And then finally, for filters, we have our status filters. So if I turn these on just so we can have a quick look at them, it shows things like, show me all the vehicles where there's an operator logged on or logged off, if the ignition's on or off, if it's reported in the last so many days, or if it hasn't reported in the last so many days, if it's moved in the last so many days, not moved in the last so many days. And then we have our asset flags. So as you can see on the side here, these flags show up next to each asset in this list. And this one, as an example, sleeping means it hasn't reported in the last 2 hours. Similar, we have things like speeding, where if I'm an HSE person, maybe I only want to see the vehicles that are actively speeding right now. Or if I'm a service technician, maybe I just want to see all the assets that have a current DVI defect, if that's something that's being recorded in the system. So what I'll go ahead and do is I will leave those flags on. And in this case, I'm choosing to not see devices that have never reported or devices that haven't reported in the last 2 hours, but I want to see everything else. So as soon as I save that, now I'm not seeing any of those vehicles that have never reported or that haven't reported in the last couple hours. So the filters are a really nice tool to basically filter down the map to just what you're interested in, so that it's not something overwhelming that you're looking at and trying to pick out the vehicles or the employees you're looking at. So the next thing we'll talk about is what we call the primary sidebar, this right here, where we have our map list. So we have a few different tabs here. We have the assets, history, safety, maintenance, which is on its way in the next version, and tickets. But we'll start here with the assets. So the first thing you can do with this list is you can expand it out into a table. Now this provides a little more information. You can see here which division or agency it's from. You can see the fuel level for each of the vehicles, the last time I reported, and things like that. But as with all the tables in FSS, you also have this button down here. So you're going to be able to add additional columns to this table. So if you were interested in the service odometer and the service hours, I can turn those on. And now what I'm seeing is I'm seeing the current service odometer and service hours here. I also have the ability, based on how I want it to look, I can drag and reorder these. And all of this is remembered on a per user basis throughout the system. So next what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll look at our list here. So as you can see right here, this someone just happened to pop up, so I'll mention it, is actively speeding while we're talking. But what I'm going to look at initially is we'll look at this Phil Gustafson vehicle. So if I click on this vehicle, that immediately locates the vehicle on the map for me. So it's a really quick and easy way just to jump straight to that vehicle. If I see any vehicles on the map, all I have to do is click on them, and that also brings up their details. So that's just a secondary way to pull up information about any vehicle. But what we'll do is we'll take a look and we'll walk through the different actions we can take on a vehicle. So locate, there's another quick link for it here, but we'll move on to quick history. Now what quick history is, it's a history of what the vehicle's done, the events it's generated, where it's been in the last 2 hours. So if there was any DTCs thrown, if they've done a DVI, ignition turned on, we're moving without being logged in, anything at all, you would see all of those events show up here. So as an example, this is a start speeding event. So it tells you when they started speeding, and it showed you the speed limit when they started speeding. And if I go a little further, I'll zoom in here so it's a little easier to see. They went all this way, and this is where they ended up stopping speeding. So it looked like they sped for 21 minutes, and the max speed was 74 miles an hour. Now, as a supervisor, I look at this and I say, something's wrong. I don't think my vehicle was doing 20 miles over the speed limit the whole time. Wait a minute. I know the speed limit on the ring road is actually 65. So how do I deal with that? I'm sure if any of you have used any telematics systems before, you're going to find that map data gets out of date. And I realized that there was construction along the ring road resurfacing last fall, and the speed limit was down to 55. It looks like it hasn't been updated yet. So how do I deal with that? So what I can go ahead and do is I can expand this table. I'll shrink this out of the way just so I still have some visibility of the map here. And I can look for my event type of speeding. Now this is something else we have throughout FSS. Throughout FSS, you can filter on any list, any table, sorry, with the filters at the top to narrow it down to just what you're looking for. So in my case, I'm looking for the speeding event that happened at 12 p.m., which is right here. That's where it ended. Here's where it started. Now, what I can do is I can look where it started, where it says it was 55 miles an hour, and I can hit this little icon here, and it brings up a speed limit override. What you can do with this is if I know that the speed limit on that ring road was 65, I could set this to 65. That updates the information locally in FSS. And from that point on, no vehicles will ever generate speed limit events until they're exceeding that 65 mile per hour limit. So I'm not going to do that right now because I don't know that that is actually the case. So I'll cancel that. Excuse me. One other thing I can mention about our tables is you can always export a table. So if I go down here to the bottom left, there's an export button. So if this was something you were interested in, you wanted to look at later, you can download that into a CSV file and then just open that in something like Microsoft Excel. So that's the quick history. Now we'll move on and we'll look at the other actions we can take on this vehicle. So you can, full history we'll look at in a little more detail on this history tab. But first off, you can view the details. So it shows you when it last reported, its current speed, it shows you the meters, things like that. And you also have quick access to all of those action items here. If you've misplaced that vehicle in this list, it's just a shortcut so you have easy access. Next, we're able to find the closest. So what this is, if there's an emergency, or if someone doesn't have the tools, or they need some assistance, things like that, this just orders your list and shows you how far away the closest vehicles are in order of closest to farthest. Next, we have the ability to unassign or assign operators. So what this is used for is if you don't have a tablet type device in there, and you don't have some kind of smart card or iButton type system for operators to log into, when that operator is given the keys in the morning, they can be assigned or unassigned from a vehicle. So I'm going to leave this operator assigned for right now, but if we were to go, say, to this vehicle where I see there's no operator assigned, I can go here, I can say assign an operator, and then it shows me all my operators, and if they're currently assigned to an asset, here's the one that I want to assign, and I could go ahead if I wanted to and assign that operator to that asset. So it's pretty fast and easy if that has to be done. The last action we have here are managing devices. So if I go to manage devices, this can happen in administration as well. And just as a note, all of these features are controlled by permissions. So depending on which employees you want to give the ability to manage devices or anything like that, you can control all of that through your permissions and employee types in administration. So I'm just going to go to manage devices. And what manage devices is, this basically brings up a list of all the devices that I have in my system, whether or not they're currently attached to another vehicle and what they're being used for. So I know that in the vehicle right now, let's say I know the piece of equipment was damaged, something happened to it, and I know that it's an ME 4230, so I can filter down. I know which ones are, if I want to look at which ones are available, I can just start typing available. And now this shows me all the ones that are available that should be sitting in my inventory. I grab the one I want. I say, yep, this is the one I'm going to put in the vehicle. Now, the first thing it does is have me confirm that I want to remove this device from the vehicle, which I have to confirm before saving it. And then all I have to do is hit add, and that device has essentially been swapped out, and that's all the steps that are required. Now, this is also available when you're viewing the FSS website on your phone, and I'll go through that a little bit later too. That would be the typical use case. A technician would walk into inventory, do the swap, put it into the vehicle, and that's the job complete. So what we'll do next is we're going to look a little bit at some data analysis, some examples, some scenarios, things like that. Is what do you do? You're gathering all of this data now. How do you deal with it? So we're going to start out with a scenario to talk through. So in this scenario, there's been complaints about speeding on the rise, and I'm the HSE manager, and I've been tasked with finding out what's going on. So now I'm going to go through and look at speeding events for individual assets and see what patterns there are. But depending on the size of my fleet, depending how I look at it, this can be a bit of a needle in a haystack. So I'm going to demonstrate that. So I'm going to go to my history. I'm going to choose the time range where I've been getting the complaints. So let's say that that was between June 1st and June 4th. Now, what I'll have to do next is choose what kind of events I'm interested in. So I'm just going to kind of go through the events, and this is all the data that FSS is currently gathering, and we continue to add more and more over time. So you can look for DTCs, vehicle inspection defects, fuel added or fuel low, geofence entry exit, any harsh driving, hours of service duty status changes, idling. You can look at any of the interfaces like inputs, PTO, ignition on off, power disconnects, things like that. Are operators moving without being signed on, because then they're not being properly tracked for speeding things. You can see where an operator signs on. There's all the safety features like the emergency buttons, lone worker, or the detection of a possible incident. If service is currently due, any types of speeding, geofence, limit, or threshold, and any unauthorized movement. But for what I'm doing in this example, I'm interested in speed limit violations. So I'm going to apply that. So I'm going to start out just by looking at a few vehicles as a starting point, just to see what these vehicles are doing. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to run a history for that. So what this is doing, this will pull all the speed limit events over a period of time and where those vehicles have been. So you can see I just chose probably 5 or 6 vehicles here, and already this map is getting pretty busy, and it would be tough to look at if I wanted to look at my whole fleet. So this probably isn't the best method for me to be going about looking at speeding. I'd probably want to start with something a little more of a bird's eye view of what this looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and use our heat map feature. So again, we'll choose the same custom range, June 1st to June 4th, where we had our complaint. We're going to choose that same event, which is a speed limit event. But this time I'm going to look at my entire fleet. So now I'm going to run this history, and it's going to show me all the speeding events for my entire fleet in a heat map view. I'm going to turn on satellite here for a minute because that shows a little bit better the contrast. Now I can see red being a hot spot where there's a lot of speeding. And as it gets lighter and lighter, there's less and less speeding. Now, I can also look at the events here. I can sort by the person who sped the most. Now, just as a bit of a disclaimer here, we have this set to track speeding at 10% over the speed limit, which I think most people is where they would typically set their cruise control or typically drive in a lot of cases. So for the purposes of this demo, there's a lot of speeding, right? But I can click on any one of these if I wanted to look at it here and look at the speeding. But in reality, the complaint that we got about speeding was for near Columbus. So I'm going to go ahead here and turn on my labels. And I can see that Columbus is down here. So I can pull my map over, I can zoom in a little bit, and I can see if someone was complaining about speeding, it's pretty obviously that it was obvious that it was happening on this road. So what I'm going to do, turn this back off for a second, I'm going to do location-based speeding. So what this does, this gives me basically an area where I can drag and drop this circle. I can change the size and focus on just the area that I'm interested in. So now what we'll do, we'll go ahead again, choose the same range, choose the same type of event. And what I'm going to do initially is search that area. So this takes a minute because what it's doing is it's looking at all the locations that have come in from vehicles in my fleet over those 4 days and only showing me a list of vehicles that have driven through that area. So as I can see here, now we're down to 13 vehicles that drove through that specific area in that 4-day time period. So now I'm down just to the vehicles that generated the complaints that I'm hearing about. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run a history on those. And at this point, once that finishes, now I'll probably start with the people that have the highest amount of speeding and work through and look at the specific instances where they've been speeding in this particular area. So that's just an example of how I can narrow down information based on what I'm being asked to look at. So if you were just given a list of all the speeding that happened, to try to find out who was speeding in this area would be a monumental task if you were just looking at all the raw data. The other data analysis tools we have within FSS are reports. So we'll go ahead and we'll look at reports a little bit as well. So I'm just going to jump over to the reports section here. And we'll look at some more kind of higher level organization administrative type reports just to give a bit of an idea. So we'll load the list of reports we have in here. I'm going to look at some operations reports. So the first one I'm going to look at is the asset scorecard overview. So what this does is this is going to give me basically a safety scorecard of my assets with a few different parameters built into it. So what it's going to show me is it's going to show me my number of penalties per 100 miles, the top 5 assets with the most penalties per 100 miles, the top 5 assets with the most speeding violations, and the top 5 assets with the most idling violations. So it looks like we're doing pretty good with idling because there is none or else it's turned off. And then down below is basically a risk factor graph of, okay, this department has 10 penalties per 100 miles, this one has 11. Again, we have our speed limit threshold set unreasonably, just so that we get enough data that there's always data to show here. So this is one example of a report. I'm going to go ahead and show you just a couple more. So next one I'm going to show you is the fleet utilization overview. This is a report that shows how your fleet's being utilized and which vehicles are being utilized more than others, things like that. So if I look at this report, the big number right in the front, there's 25 different asset types being utilized in my fleet in the last 30 days. I can see that they've driven 1.2 million miles. I can see that there's 21,000 hours, and the total fuel consumed was 306,000 gallons. So I have a good idea of what this fleet's doing. Now I can go ahead and look here. My heaviest used vehicle was that intermodal type we've been looking at, and that would also line up with having the most engine hours, right? But if I look at this one, for example, this is the cargo van. That's the that has the second highest engine hours. The cargo van here is actually, based on the grid below there, this one. So the cargo van is not making very many miles, but maybe it's idling too much to get that many engine hours. So maybe that's something I can look at. And then the last report we'll look at today is a bit of a Watchdog overview report. So what the Watchdog report is when was the last message received by my fleet? So is it online right now, in the past month, in the past week, the past 3 days, or has it been offline over the course of the past quarter? This report's set up for. And then what it also shows is when the ECU's been connected. So the device is reporting in, I'm getting GPS from the device, but has the connection to the ECU been disconnected, so I'm no longer getting any of my meters, which would be a problem. So if I look here, we're currently online devices, we're getting there's 202 of them reporting, but we're only getting ECU information from 143. So that's probably something where someone could look into why that is. Now, maybe some of them are asset trackers where there is no ECU connection, or maybe it's a piece of equipment where the ECU connection is not available, but it is something that can be looked at. And as with all our reports, you can drill down by clicking on this and it would show you all the data in a table format. So as you can see, you can have all the data in the world within one of these systems, but unless you have nice reports or like histories or ways to drill down into the information, it becomes really difficult to use and actually get what you need out of the system, which is where truly FSS shines, the ability to pull information, the information you want out of the system. So next on here, I'm just going to show you a little bit on the administration side. So the first thing we're going to look at is assets. I'm just going to go through a little bit of the assets. So I'm just going to filter and we'll pick on our vehicle 777 again, and we'll look at this vehicle. Now, as Mike said, all the information on the left-hand side here, the names, the associations, all of its details, all of that is automatically going to be filled in from Fleet Focus with the integration. So you're not going to have to worry about this. So the only thing that a user actually has to do is they have to choose what device is going into the piece of equipment, which again, we showed you how that can be done. They can do that on here or on their mobile device, and they have to choose the meter source. So this is where a lot of people sometimes have confusion or aren't sure what to use, things like that. So we have 2 different meter sources. We have one here that this is the odometer that's being reported from the engine. And as I can see, this has come in probably the last minute here. This information comes in with every GPS report. So it's currently typically every minute or sub 1 minute, depending on what the parameters are for GPS. And then we have what's called accumulated GPS. So for light duty vehicles, things like that, often what you're getting from the engine is what is correct for that vehicle. But once you get into heavy duty trucks, different types of yellow iron, things like that, what you'll find is there's a dash computer that shows you an odometer and an engine computer that shows you an odometer. And what most people use is the dash odometer, which basically is when someone goes and writes down the mileage that there is on the vehicle when they're doing a service or something like that, shows there. So for whatever reason, this engine odometer isn't what's being reported. When a vehicle comes in for service and you take the meter reading from that vehicle, you can set that as a seed value here. Then every minute, when let's say that we see that the vehicle moved 1 mile or whatever has been calculated from the previous minute, that mile is then added to the seed value. So this seed value is always going to continue to match whatever's on that dash, which will match whatever you'd expect to see in Fleet Focus, which is the exact same way that engine hours work. So when you first do this install, you'll check, does the reported ECU mileage and hours match what you have in Fleet Focus? No. Then you would go ahead and you would enter those Fleet Focus seed values here, and you would track that from that point on. So these are the two things that have to be set up for each vehicle during the installation process, but it's a pretty fast check here and pretty easy to install this. Now we'll just go through a few more features here. Operator safety. So this is, you set your harsh driving thresholds, incident notification, coaching, speeding. This is where, as I mentioned, we had it going faster than 10% over the speed limit to track speeding, or you could set it as a maximum of a fixed number of miles over the speed limit, depending how you wanted it. As far as maintenance goes, you can set idling parameters, coaching on idling, fuel levels. So I want to be notified as a maintenance person or as a fueler, let's say, when my water pump that's pumping water somewhere's fuel level is down below 15% as an example, right? So, and there's also PTO thresholds to make sure that people aren't using the PTO harder than they should be. And then the last section here, we have interfaces. So this is just the setup of all the interfaces you have, like a PTO, lifts, underbodies for plows, beacons, things like that. This is basically all the different inputs we have that you would configure on a per vehicle by per vehicle basis. Now, you don't have to set everything on a per vehicle basis. You can actually go in and set up asset types. Now, what asset types do is these are settings that we have for all the assets of this type. When I make a change here, it affects all of the assets. Now I can go in and override that per asset, but typically people will leave this set. So again, for meter sources, if I know that my heavy duty Peterbilt trucks, I always want them to use the reported engine hours and reported odometer, I can set that here. No one's going to have to play with that when it comes time to setting up that vehicle. Same with reporting rates. I can set the reporting rates to report at least every 10 minutes or when it turns 45 degrees or when it travels more than 1 mile. So in this case, what's probably going to happen normally driving down the highway, it's going to be reporting once every mile. If I'm just sitting somewhere, it's going to report at least once every 10 minutes. The next thing we want to go through here, again, the operator safety, the driver behavior stuff, going to look very similar to what we just set up on the, looked at the asset, same with maintenance. Interfaces, this is where I would add new interfaces. So if I knew that these vehicles also had a beacon here, I can set that up. And from this point on, whenever we get that input, it's going to show up in my asset history and my reports as a beacon. And the last thing is creating custom events. So what a custom event is it's kind of a combination of things. And I'll give you an example. So let's say that we create a custom event here called driving with PTO on. So what we're going to, our first criteria is we must have speed. So let's say we're driving about 5 miles an hour for 60 seconds. So at that point, I think I'm driving this vehicle. Then the next event type will be an input, and that's when PTO is active. So now what I do, I can add this event, save that, and we're now going to get an alert. You can actually notify the driver as well that they are moving with their PTO engaged. Another good example of this is you have an underbody, you're plowing snow in the winter, you're driving without the beacon turned on. So again, this is just another great example of where that can, where custom events can show up and really tailor to your business. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a little bit of how FSS works on the mobile device, just kind of so you get a look and feel of that. So I'm just going to open it up on my phone here. We're going to swap over to there. So when you first log on to the mobile device, this is my phone. You're going to see, so the way, you're going to see a screen very similar to that primary sidebar we talked about on FSS. So it's going to look very familiar. The driver's going to be able to scroll it. We can still see that person. Another person seems to be speeding here. What one of the things we have is just for quick access, whenever I turn my phone to landscape mode, it automatically jumps me to the map. So I don't have to worry about map buttons or anything else. If I'm curious to look at where vehicles are on the map, I can obviously zoom in, zoom out, just as I would expect on any map application on my phone. So that all works. You flip it back up, it brings me back to the list. You're also going to have your filters here, so I can filter down just to the information I'm interested in. Again, if I'm a road supervisor or something, I'm only interested in the subset of vehicles. That's where I'm going to set up my filter, and that's what's going to show up on my phone for my vehicles. The other thing you can do is you can find a vehicle, same as we did on the main website, and you can also run your quick histories and do all of those different things here as well. So again, we can see those speeding events we looked into, knowing that that was wrong, it'll be fixed next time. You can look at the table of your speeding events, and we can go back to the list here. So the other thing I mentioned is you're also able to manage your devices. So if I have to swap out a device, I want to see which devices are available, and I want to look for the device that I'm looking to, which is the 4230. So now here's all the devices that are available. So when I go out and I look in inventory, that's all. There's 37 of them there. I have a much shorter list to deal with. I can click on one of those. I can say, yeah, I'm going to remove this from this vehicle, and I'm going to add this one in, hit add, and that's complete. So that's your physical swap done within the FSS system by your service tech right when they're doing that swap out of that equipment. One thing we never talked about on the main website was the safety aspect. So Mike said, this is where you have your lone worker. So if I go in here, I can configure my lone worker to check an interval in minutes. So if I expect someone, they're working by themselves, it's late at night or a bit of a dangerous area, I want them to check in every 20 minutes. That's saved now for this vehicle. Now what I can go ahead and do is I can turn the monitoring on, or depending what type of device they have in their vehicle, they can also turn the monitoring on. And at that point, they're going to be reminded to check in 5 minutes prior to that timer expiring, or if they miss checking in, I'm going to get an alert banner either on my phone, my email, text, on the FSS website, letting me know that someone failed to check in. So at that point, as a supervisor, dispatcher, whatever, I have to start looking into why hasn't that person checked in? I expected them to check in by now. And then if there are any safety alerts, like a missed check-in or an emergency triggered or something like that, it would show up right here on your list, and you could take ownership of that. You could put notes on that for later audits, things like that, and then you could clear that emergency. Oh, the driver forgot to check in. His phone was on the dash, or he didn't have the device turned on. He was somewhere else, and you can check in for that operator. The last thing I'll show you quickly, Mike had mentioned a little bit, is we have the ability to do tickets. Now this is typically on the operation side, but what tickets are, this is available on the main website as well, but you can go in and you can edit tickets here. So if you were doing road repair, if you were doing something like that, and tickets were being assigned out to users, they could put that information in here. And this is a customizable form that you would create specifically for your business to go in and record all the information that you would have about the specific piece of work, and then save that. And then all of that is automatically being recorded on the dispatch side, as well as this would show up if they had a tablet installed in the vehicle, a similar look and feel. So that's pretty much our demo today on AssetWorks FSS. It's very high level. We never got into a lot of detail on any of these features. It's probably something that if you have a lot of detailed questions, we'd be more than happy to put into probably a demo of your own specifically for your business. But what we can do now is, I guess, open it up to the floor for any questions that anyone might have.
All right, thanks, Mike and Phil. That was awesome. Great presentation there. So we are going to open up the floor for some questions. Just a reminder, if you have any questions at this time, please send them to the host using the WebEx chat tool on your screen. Provided that we have enough time, I'll pass your question to Mike and Phil, and we'll be happy to answer. So we do have a couple questions here right out the gate, and I do want to get some going here. So the one question that came in was, are you able to control the speeding indicator of specific vehicles? It looks like this certain attendee has some police and fire vehicles where they would want to exclude the certain measures. So, is there a way that you can control the speeding indicator on specific vehicles?
Yeah, there definitely is. And what I'll do is I'll just jump back here quickly. So we were on asset types here. All you would have to do is under operator safety, you would set speeding thresholds for an asset type of police car, an asset type of fire truck, and you would set that all up here, which would probably be significantly higher than you would on typical vehicles. And once that's set, then all your vehicles of fire truck type or police car type would then have that increased speed limit where they would be allowed, let's say, 30% over the speed limit. And at that point, then there wouldn't be the notifications we're seeing right now as many as when we see the 10% over.
All right, awesome. This one attendee wants to actually know, can the GPS data be fed into another system such as ESRI?
It definitely can. What I'm going to do is I'll just jump out of here for 1 minute. So I'm going to open up divisions, and I'm just going to look at one of our divisions here. For each division, we have the ability to go in and turn on our APIs and make those available to third-party products. So as you can see here, we have APIs for assets, devices, divisions, vehicle inspections, employees, events, geofences, telematics, and tickets. Now, GPS information specifically shows up in actually a lot of the different APIs, but if you wanted the GPS information with the events so that you would know, let's say, when a code was thrown where it was, or when the DVI was done, or whatever it might be, then you would probably just end up connecting to our events API, and you have the ability to pull that into your ESRI data.
All right, awesome. So next question, does this product allow for camera inputs, and how many? It looks like this customer has another customer that's very large. They're buying some new trucks, it looks like, with some cameras. So does this product allow for camera inputs, and how many?
So that's all, that all ends up, oh, go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say, Mike, I think you're on mute, so if you wanna. No, I can't. So Phil, if you wanna go ahead and take over.
Sure. So Mike showed you kind of that list of devices at the start. It all depends on which types of devices you select for your vehicles. So if I go into asset types here, and I just edit any of these, let's go to my intermotive one again, I'll pick on it. Oops.
If I go in here, jump in here, Phil. Sorry, Phil, let me jump in. I believe the goal was to see whether we could take if the camera input. So for the cameras, if you have multiple cameras on a vehicle, you're going to need a digital visual video recording box on that vehicle to go with those cameras. So from the actual capturing of images and whatnot, you're going to need existing camera equipment. But if those cameras are triggering outputs, then Phil, you can continue with what we can do here. So we can capture some information, but we're not capturing the images. You'd need the onboard DVR to do that.
Yeah, and all I was going to say is, yeah, once you have that, if they have outputs to say, oh, the rear camera was triggered, the front camera was triggered, the falling asleep camera was triggered, what have you, all the fancy cameras they have nowadays, right? You could basically show those events on the history and in reports as well of when cameras were triggered, or create notifications being on those when those cameras are triggered. So again, it would depend a little bit on what type of camera system was selected. But as Mike says, we don't record the camera data specifically. A lot of these are fairly simple GPS boxes that we use here, but they could output information, so we could at least know when they were triggered to basically highlight when someone should be looking at that video stream that is captured on the vehicle and then sent up to the cloud.
Okay, awesome. Mike, this question is actually from you from earlier. So all the screenshots were FSS. So if they had a different telematic device, would it be a huge difference if for the screens in user experience?
Yeah, I guess if I assume that if you have a different telematics device, that different telematics device is going to have its own current website and maps to go with that. So the assumption would be that it would be different screens. So FSS is a standalone, GPS telematics solution with its own maps that talk into our devices that we have here today. The FAM5 integration, in terms of the meters, where the meters are shown, where the trouble codes are shown, those all are consistent across, if any people are using our telematics cloud to get the data back in. But from the mapping perspective, all the screens you shown today would be specific to FSS.
Okay, awesome. Good to know. We got about one or two more questions here. So this one attendee wants to know, there's certain products, GPS products out there that uses an algorithm to calculate meter readings. So they want to know, are we saying that FSS uses the ECM instead of a calculated meter?
Yes. So FSS, basically, I'm just going to jump out here again to an asset. FSS takes the meters directly from the engine. So you can't edit these right here. These are read-only because those are coming directly from the engine, and you can see the last time that it was sent in. So if you want the actual engine, you would choose this reported. You would choose reported for both. You'd be getting all of the meters right from the engine. Now, if that information is not available from the engine, if for whatever reason your value and fleet focus is different, you can go to this accumulated values and get it there. Now, some assets, let's say like a Zoom boom, you may necessarily not be able to get that information from the engine because there isn't an engine connection, let's say. Now, in that case, we would be calculating the odometer based on GPS locations, and that would be within about 5% accurate. And we would be calculating the hours based on the ignition on-off. So when the ignition's on and the vehicle's running, we basically just have a timer counting up the time. When it was turned off, it would be turned off. And again, you'd be able to set that seed value to match what's on your hubometer or your little gauge that's on your Zoom boom or whatever you happen to have on that particular asset.
Okay, cool. Last question, and we'll get going here. So, does the device continue to track vehicle location even when the ignition is off? And how long is the history data available for? So I'm assuming like they're asking like, how long does FSS continue to hold that history data for?
Sure. So for the first question, when the vehicle's turned off, you can configure your devices to send in, let's say, every 30 minutes. So if you had, let's say, a light generator and you had a device on there and it was stolen, you could have it wake up every 30 minutes or wake up on motion, different options, and send in a report so that you're not missing that asset. So you can have it wake up and send in a report. As for how long do you have access to the data? So when we go here and we're talking about our asset history page and running these queries for custom ranges, you have a range of all the data that FSS has ever stored for you. So typically out of the box, FSS comes with 1 year of stored data, but you can bump that all the way up to 7 years. And then you would be able to run these histories all the way back 7 years if that's how much data you have built up in your system.
Okay, awesome, cool. Well, that does that does it. So, Mike, Phil, thank you so much. It looks like we are all out of time for today. I want to thank you all again for taking the time to attend today's presentation. Hopefully, you've all secured some valuable takeaways to keep in mind moving forward. Mike and Phil, I also want to thank you on behalf of AssetWorks once again for sharing your expertise and product highlights with everyone today. If you do have any questions, Mike, Phil, and I will be sticking around for another few minutes. But thank you all attending today, and we'll see you next time.